Industry now that we want to talk about that says it's being bullied by the federal government. We have Ashley Webster out on the road today. He's actually in a big fishing town in the state of Massachusetts that says it's getting slammed by regulations. Ashley so happens to be joined right now by the most senior Democrat on the House Financial Services Committee. Great guest. Ashley, take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much, Connor. Indeed, we are in Gloucester, Massachusetts. About an hour north of Boston. It's the oldest seaport in this country, going all the way back to 1623. Fishing is a big part of this community, as you can imagine. But the people who make their living on the water here say they are under threat from federal regulations that basically dictate exactly where, when, and how much they can catch. And they say for many of the smaller operators, they just cannot eke out a living. As you mentioned, Connell, joining me now is Democratic Congressman Barney Frank. And Congressman, thank you so much for joining me. I know this has been an issue very close to you. You represent New Bedford, another port nearby here, and obviously has an impact there. The federal regulations, we are being told here in Gloucester, are just devastating, especially the local smaller operations from actually making a living. They say they just can't live with these new rules. What is being done to address it?
Well, it's only partly the new rules. I do want to be clear that this is not something new. We have had a problem with excessively rigid regulations, and it goes back to no partisanship here. And in fact, we've been able to make some progress recently. We were able to get the law changed, for instance, in the Canadian boundary area, not far from here, which is fished by people from New Bedford that I represent, from Gloucester, my colleague John Tierney. We worked with the Republican senators from Maine, and we have increased that. So with regard to the amount of fish, we've made some progress. The problem is that there is this view on the part of the administrators of the fishing entity, and again it goes from the Bush administration on into this one, that we'd be better off with fewer boats. Somehow I think they think that would be easier to control. Now that, particularly for Democratic administration, goes opposite to our view that we should oppose excessive consolidation. Look, if it happens naturally, that's one thing. But the government shouldn't be a force for hurting the smaller people and pressuring them to go.
You're saying
to bigger,
too much
bigger
regulation in this case is not a good thing.
It's not just too much regulation, it's the kind of regulation. Look, fishing has to be regulated. Nobody in the fishing industry doubts that. You could not have a totally unregulated fishery. It wouldn't be good for anybody. What the fishermen want is sensible regulation that takes into account a valid notion of how many fish are out there and listens to their expertise, which is very significant. But the add-on was, we were able in 2006, and a bill went through that I didn't like for a number of reasons, but we did get resistance to what was then being contemplated by the Bush administration, which was something they called individual transferable quotas. It was a way to allow the big guys to buy out the small guys, and with pressure on the small guys to sell. We said that could only happen if there was a referendum in each fishery, whether you have the New England fishery, the Mid-Atlantic fishery, etc. What the administration then did, inappropriately and illegitimately in my judgment, was to get around that by saying, okay, we won't call it individual transferable quotas. We'll have something we call catch shares, which has the same practical effect. And they said this does not require a referendum. Fishing industries and the cities of New Bedford and Gloucester.
And that led to a lawsuit?
And the Judge Zobel, said, if you read her opinion, as I read her opinion, on the merits, you guys have a pretty good case. But we have a doctrine in America that we've long had called deference to administrators. And when the administrator of an entity interprets a statute, that gets a lot of weight. Tie goes to the fielder. And what she decided was that, well, we could make a good case because the administrator of the Fishery Service insisted on the catch shares, that was going to be there. Now, subsequently, in a bipartisan way, a group of us on the East Coast got an amendment to the appropriations bill saying you can't do any more of these. We couldn't undo the one they have. We ran into a little obstacle because the West Coast fishermen, for reasons I don't understand, but they're right, they
okay
like the
with
catch shares. So what our strategy now is, and it's Congressman Jones, a Republican of North Carolina, myself, and a whole bunch of other Democrats and Republicans, is to say, in the East Coast, on our fishery on the East Coast, let's only have referenda. So we'll be able to keep that from going forward for new areas, but we're stuck with it for now.
Congressman, let me ask you this. As we're going through this, and clearly this is a very complicated issue, this comes at a time when this economy is struggling to get any traction, unemployment stubbornly high, above 9%. How in good conscience can this administration allow something like this to happen where it's costing people's jobs?
I don't want to buy into this administration because they're no different here than the Bush administration.
But the focus has been jobs, and the president is going to come out with a speech after Labor Day.
Why introduce a partisan element into a public policy dispute?
Well, no, it's to do with jobs, which are not partisan.
No, it isn't partisan, but jobs were important 10 years ago here. It's not that jobs have suddenly...
But we're talking about now.
I'm sorry, but I insist on talking about things holistically.
Yeah.
And I really resist the tendency to misdescribe the issue, because if it's imputed to just one administration, the problem won't be understood and it won't be correctly affected. You have had a bipartisan opposition, in my judgment, to sensible fishery regulation by the National Marine Fisheries Service going through several administrations. And I have to say, for the areas that are affected, like New Bedford, which I represent, we've had a jobs problem there for some time. There's nothing new about the jobs problem because this is a part of the
but it falls on the responsibility of the current administration, despite what's happened between...
I won't play into your trying to partisanize this.
No, I'm not trying to do that at all.
You're trying to blame one administration for an ongoing policy, and if people don't understand the policy...
I'm talking about the lack of jobs that are being created in this country. Nothing to do with Republicans, Democrats, Independents.
No, but talking only about...
the issue at hand.
I'm saying, why are you resisting talking about this in a more thoughtful way? The fact is that jobs have been an issue in the city of New Bedford long before the last couple of years.
Sure.
Unemployment is not a nationally uniform situation. It's worse now than it was naturally a few years ago. But in the city of New Bedford that I represent, jobs have been a problem because of international trade things. So I just cannot agree with you that this has somehow become more of an issue then. Look, 2006, when we were not in this current situation, before the financial crisis, when we were not in a bad unemployment situation, I was very angry at the notion of this kind of approach. So the problem has been that this has been an area of national policy, fishing, where only a few communities are represented, where there is a general, I think, unexamined notion that we must all be good environmentalists without understanding that that's not what's involved here. And that's what we are trying to fight in a bipartisan way.
Congressman Barney Frank, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about this. We'll continue to stay on it, but thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it. Connell, back to you.
Good chat there, Ashley. All right, thank you very much. Ashley Webster in Gloucester, Massachusetts, where he'll speak with Senator John Kerry. Another exclusive interview that's coming up next hour on Fox Business, so don't miss that.